This is the Moskva, a $3 billion warship armed with the most powerful radar in the Black Sea. It was supposed to be untouchable. Yet, on April 13, 2022, it was struck by two missiles fired from a truck on shore, 60 miles away. How did a coastal battery manage to sneak a decisive blow past the most sophisticated air defense system on the water? The answer lies in a tiny drone, a sudden storm, and a perfect, devastating act of deception. The story of the Moskva begins with a singular, immense, Cold War purpose. She was laid down in a shipyard that was then Soviet Ukraine, built not just as a ship, but as a weapon designed for one specific, titanic task: to eliminate American aircraft carrier battle groups. Initially named the Slava, Glory, she was the lead ship of her class, displacing over 11,000 tons of steel and bristling with the most powerful armaments the Soviet Union could muster. Her designers envisioned her as the ultimate counter to United States naval supremacy, a vessel whose sheer volume of firepower could overwhelm the layered defenses of an American fleet in a major oceanic conflict. This grand design philosophy meant she was heavily optimized for offense and layered defense, but less so for modern compartmentalization and damage control. Renamed the Moskva in the mid-1990s, she became the undisputed flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, the enduring heart of an empire's maritime power projection. Her presence alone was a profound statement of naval authority and geopolitical intent. At 611 feet long, she carried 16 massive P-1000 Vulcan anti-ship cruise missiles, often called shipwreckers, each capable of delivering its payload over distances of hundreds of miles. These massive missiles, slung in distinctive launcher tubes along her superstructure, were her primary offensive threat. But her true power, the source of her invulnerability, was in her defense. The S-300F Fort, a long-range surface-to-air missile system, the naval equivalent of an airtight dome of untouchable protection. This system, backed by layers of medium and short-range defense guns and radar, was designed to neutralize any air threat, from fighter jets to advanced cruise missiles. She was a self-contained fortress, a vessel whose very existence projected absolute security over hundreds of square miles of ocean. In the early months of the conflict in the year 2022, the Moskva epitomized the hubris and confidence of the invading force. She patrolled the waters off the Ukrainian coast, operating with casual impunity far from the nearest Russian port. Her commanders knew that no conventional naval threat remained to challenge them. The Ukrainian Navy was small and crippled, essentially incapable of mounting a surface engagement. The only realistic threat was from the coast, but the flagship sat 60, sometimes 75, miles offshore. This distance was her calculated margin of error, her ironclad guarantee. No weapon in Ukraine's known arsenal was believed to have the range or the penetration power to reach her. She was untouchable, a floating citadel whose advanced radar systems, coupled with her formidable S-300F, guaranteed she could detect and annihilate any incoming threat long before it came near. She served as the essential air defense shield for the entire Black Sea Fleet, allowing smaller, less protected vessels to operate closer to shore in safety. Her strategic value was immense, her psychological value incalculable, a constant, visible affirmation of naval dominance. She was not just a symbol of force, but a vessel tied to recent, famous defiance. It was the Moskva that had hailed the tiny garrison on Snake Island, demanding surrender and receiving the now legendary reply that galvanized a nation. This incident only solidified her image in the minds of the defenders, a cruel, technological tyrant, sitting heavy on the water, seemingly secure in the promise of her steel and her Soviet-era technology. To destroy her would be more than a military victory. It would be the shattering of a psychological barrier that had been reinforced for decades. It would mean that nowhere was safe and no force was invincible. The impossible had to be found. But every fortress has one blind spot, and the defenders were about to find it. If you enjoy witnessing how impossible odds are overcome by sheer courage and ingenuity, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us tell more of these critical cinematic stories from history. For Ukraine's coastal defenders, the Black Sea was a constant, looming threat, and every day was a scramble to find a counterpunch capable of reaching the unreachable fleet. Their only hope lay in a weapon few had believed in, a missile named after the sea god, born from scraps and fierce national pride, waiting for its impossible moment. The weapon in question was the Neptune anti-ship cruise missile. Its story is an underdog epic in itself. Developed by the Luch Design Bureau in Kyiv, the Neptune was born not in an era of limitless funding, but out of absolute military necessity and a chilling prediction of future conflict. After the seizure of Crimea in the year 2014, it became painfully clear that Ukraine needed an indigenous naval defense capability. They needed a long-range deterrent, something cheap, mobile, and effective enough to target the massive ships of the Black Sea Fleet. The project moved in fits and starts, often starved of resources, yet driven by the dedication of a core team of engineers determined to protect their nation's coastline. These engineers overcame immense technological hurdles, sourcing key components internationally, while developing the critical guidance and terminal seeker systems domestically. The resulting missile was a testament to national industrial persistence, a direct response to a looming existential threat. Neptune was the answer. It drew on an older Soviet design, the KH-35, but was almost completely remanufactured. It was heavily modernized with entirely new electronics, improved solid fuel boosters, and a sophisticated guidance system capable of mid-course corrections. This was no simple rocket. It was a complex cruise missile that flew at subsonic speeds, but possessed one critical, lethal feature: its sea-skimming flight profile. Once launched, the missile would ignite its booster and arc high, then quickly drop to within mere feet of the water surface. This was achieved through a sensitive radar altimeter that constantly measured its distance to the waves. It effectively hid the missile from the curvature of the Earth, and crucially, from the long-range horizon radar systems of enemy ships. Its ability to maneuver slightly in its terminal phase, coupled with its exceptionally low altitude, made it an exceptionally difficult target for any conventional surface-to-air missile system to acquire and engage. Its maximum range was an official 175 miles, more than enough to threaten the Moskva from the safety of the coast. The missile was deployed not on a large, vulnerable ship, but on a mobile coastal defense system mounted on trucks. This was the genius of its design, emphasizing mobility, concealment, and survivability. The firing unit, consisting of the command vehicle, the transporter erector launchers, TELs, and the support vehicles, could shoot and scoot. They would appear suddenly on the shore, launch their weapon in a matter of minutes, and disappear into the tree line or pre-surveyed hiding spots before counter-battery fire could even be calculated by enemy systems. The team operating this system was small, highly specialized, and working in a hostile environment, fighting against logistical nightmares and the constant threat of aerial surveillance to keep their limited supply of missiles ready. The development itself had been a financial and political struggle. plagued by delays and skepticism from those who believed a small, struggling post-Soviet country could never build a credible weapon to challenge the titans of the sea. But by early 2022, the Neptune system was operational, though its true capability remained unproven on the battlefield. It sat concealed somewhere along the coast, near Odessa, a ghost on the shore, waiting for a chance that everyone knew was nearly impossible. They had a weapon that could reach, but the Moskva had a defense that could annihilate. The question was not just if the missile could fly 75 miles, but if it could defeat the colossal radar, the fire control systems, and the S-300F array of the Black Sea flagship. It was a single, high-stakes bullet aimed at a technologically protected giant, and they needed more than just faith in their missile to succeed. The missile was ready, but the odds were still 1,000 to 1. To win, they had to break the ship's concentration without firing a single shot. War in the 21st century is fought not just with steel, but with silence, the unseen hand of intelligence guiding the weapon to its target. The flagship was cloaked in the vastness of the sea, but the collective eyes of the world were watching, waiting for the split second of information that would turn a desperate hope into a guaranteed victory. The first essential step was location. The Moskva maintained strict radio silence, a common naval tactic, but in modern warfare, every electronic emission is a breadcrumb. Naval ships leave a distinct electronic and infrared signature. Through the network of open-source intelligence, OSINT, and discrete electronic surveillance provided by partners, the ship's patrol box was eventually narrowed down. This OSINT effort involved cross-referencing commercial satellite imagery, analyzing automatic identification system, AIS, data from nearby vessels, and tracking faint electronic signals such as routine radar sweeps and communication bursts. This painstaking data collection gave the Ukrainian team a clear, actionable location. On the evening of April 13th, 2022, a land-based radar system in Ukraine, possibly assisted by a sophisticated foreign reconnaissance aircraft, orbiting high above the Black Sea, registered a massive, unmistakable target 75 miles offshore. The target was the Moskva. This information was only the beginning. The flagship's air defense shield was designed to track dozens of targets simultaneously and neutralize them with overwhelming firepower. A single missile launch would likely be intercepted by the massive S-300F array before it closed the distance. The Ukrainian defense team knew they needed a distraction, an electronic feint to confuse the ship's sophisticated multi-million-dollar systems. This was the key to the lock. What happened next was a brilliant, low-tech act of deception, a masterpiece of asymmetric warfare. The operational theory suggests a small, inconspicuous aerial drone was launched from the coast, possibly a Bayraktar TB2 or another surveillance drone. The drone itself posed no real threat to the cruiser, but it immediately drew the attention of the ship's advanced radar and electronic countermeasures. The flagship's operators would have been forced to dedicate significant resources, radar tracking beams, and fire control channels to defending against the perceived aerial threat. The massive ship's radar and fire control systems focused on defending against a high-altitude aerial threat from a drone would be momentarily shifted. The operators would have had to decide where to focus the S-300F's considerable power, on the small pest in the air or the empty sea surface. Compounding this crucial moment was the weather. A localized storm had blown up over the northern Black Sea, bringing with it rain squalls, low cloud cover, and choppy, unpredictable waters. The storm was a hidden ally to the defenders. Rough seas degrade a ship's radar performance, creating clutter, surface, noise, and false returns, especially when trying to detect small objects close to the water. The combination of the drone distraction pulling the ship's focus upward and the storm masking the sea surface created a perfect, fleeting window of opportunity that would not last. The massive symbol of naval supremacy was now looking in the wrong direction, its sophisticated shield compromised by nature and a simple electronic ghost. The Moskva was blind, but they had less than 10 minutes to capitalize on the chaos before the storm passed and the giant woke up. The order was given to prepare the launch. The order was given in hushed anticipation, a single finger pressing the button that launched the fate of the war across the waves. In the dark, wet chaos of the Black Sea, 2 Neptune missiles raced toward the unseeing giant, their sea-skimming flight a silent prayer against the hubris of the flagship's commanders. From the concealed launch platform, the 2 R-360 Neptune missiles roared to life and arced skyward, reaching cruising altitude before dropping sharply into their terminal attack profile. The launch team, operating the Teals, immediately executed their shoot and scoot protocol, packing up and moving to avoid counter-detection. Meanwhile, the missiles' kerosene-fueled engines pushed them across the dark sea at subsonic speed, hugging the wave tops barely 15 feet above the churned water. This low profile was their ultimate advantage, rendering them virtually invisible to the Moskva's air defense. They were flying just below the minimum detection altitude of the ship's radar, which still focused on the higher-flying drone, or perhaps compensating for the storm, simply missed the twin streaks of doom skimming across the sea. The S-300F system, designed to eliminate aircraft and high-flying ballistic missiles, was utterly blind to the small, low-flying targets of the Neptune. The time of flight was approximately 7 minutes. 7 minutes of existential tension for the small crew who fired them, knowing that any mistake, a technical malfunction, a late radar pickup, a lucky shot from the ship's last line of defense, would nullify their victory. Every second was a gamble, but the systems held. The missiles executed their final guidance commands with precision, utilizing their active radar seekers in the last stages to home in on the massive electronic signature of the cruiser. The first missile struck the Moskva amidships, around the main missile storage area. The impact was immediately followed by a devastating secondary explosion as the fuel and propellant ignited. The second missile followed quickly after, striking in a similar location near the vessel's propulsion section. The blasts, which penetrated the unarmored hull, were immediately catastrophic. The large Soviet-era cruiser, built for sheer firepower and anti-air defense, was notoriously vulnerable to internal fire due to the volume of ammunition and fuel carried and poor compartmentalization. The explosions triggered a massive internal fire that spread rapidly and uncontrollably through the vessel's multiple decks, fueled by the vast stores of fuel and, critically, by the massive complement of ready ammunition the ship carried, including the volatile P-1000 Vulcan missiles themselves. Cascading explosions rocked the vessel from within, shattering systems and bulkheads. On board, the scene instantly devolved into chaos. The massive fire control system was disabled, power lines were severed, and the ability to fight the fire was lost. Damage control teams, trained for conventional combat, were quickly overwhelmed by the inferno and the subsequent internal blasts. The ship's internal security system, which relied on electricity and the integrity of bulkheads, failed. The invincible flagship was burning, and the source of the fire was uncontrollable. An urgent distress signal was sent out into the turbulent night. The steel Leviathan designed to survive a nuclear conflict, was being undone by two relatively small, domestically produced anti-ship missiles and its own internal design vulnerabilities. The loss of the Flagship was a foregone conclusion, a devastating, visible testament to a colossal failure of defense. We are nearing the conclusion of this incredible story, but the history that shapes our world is endless. We encourage you to share this story with a friend who loves history and drop a comment below, letting us know what other legendary military upsets you think we should cover. By dawn, the waves had swallowed the symbol of an empire, trading its advanced radar for a place on the sea floor. The sinking of the Moskva was more than a strategic victory. It was a psychological hammer blow heard around the world, proving that even the most heavily defended giant could be felled by ingenuity and an impossible shot. The immediate aftermath was shrouded in the fog of conflict and denial. Russia refused to acknowledge the humiliation of a successful Ukrainian strike, issuing contradictory statements. They initially claimed a fire caused by a detonation of ammunition had damaged the ship. Later, they admitted the ship had lost stability and gone under while being towed in stormy weather. The truth was starkly different. The Flagship had been fundamentally disabled by enemy action. Salvage efforts were attempted, with auxiliary vessels rushing to the site in the storm, but the internal damage and catastrophic flooding were too extensive to be contained. The vessel finally rolled and settled beneath the waves, disappearing into the depths of the Black Sea. The strategic consequences were instantaneous and profound, far outweighing the material cost of the vessel. The sheer audacity and success of the strike forced a fundamental recalibration of naval strategy. The entire Black Sea fleet immediately retreated, moving their patrol lines an additional 20 miles or more further offshore, well outside the maximum effective range of the Neptune missiles. The psychological dominance Russia had enjoyed in the northern Black Sea vanished overnight. The Moskva had been the fleet's principal mobile air defense asset. Its destruction created a massive, critical gap in air cover, leaving the remaining surface ships vulnerable to both missile and air threats. The threat of an amphibious assault on the city of Odessa, which the Moskva had been positioned to support, suddenly became far more complex and risky, contributing to the ultimate failure of that objective. The entire calculus of naval operations in the Black Sea was irreversibly altered by a single coastal battery. The incident effectively created a security bubble along the Ukrainian coast that the fleet could not penetrate without unacceptable risk. The loss was a symbolic catastrophe. It was the largest Russian warship to be destroyed in conflict since the Second World War. The sinking of the Flagship, the vessel that carried the name of the nation's capital, became the ultimate proof that the supposedly invincible force was fallible. For Ukraine, the victory was a rallying cry that galvanized international support and confidence in their ability to fight an asymmetric modern war. The crew that fired the Neptunes and the engineers who designed them became instant legends, demonstrating the power of ingenuity and intelligence over sheer tonnage. The final resting place of the vessel lies on the seabed of the Black Sea. A few months after the sinking, Ukraine declared the wreck a site of underwater cultural heritage, a powerful, wry joke that cemented the Moskva's status not as a war grave, but as a monument to its own defeat and the ultimate demonstration of modern, decentralized warfare. The sinking of the Moskva is the perfect modern example of the OSINT strike. It proves that in the information age, superior intelligence and clever deception are more valuable than superior steel. A humble, homegrown missile, guided by ingenuity and capitalizing on a moment of distraction, changed the strategic reality of an entire sea. It is a story of how a seemingly impossible task can be achieved when desperation births brilliance. If you want to see more stories about the incredible battles that shaped our world and hear the truth behind history's greatest military upsets, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and let us know in the comments what piece of history you think deserves to be told next.